Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com with some more commentary on just my thoughts on things. And what I want to talk about today is culture and inequality. Okay, so when you talk to people on the left, one of the major gripes they have is inequality. And one of the reasons they have issues with inequality is because of power imbalances, in the sense that if you're really poor, what your boss, suddenly the decisions of your boss to hire you, fire you, become that much more sort of life or death. Okay, it has a much greater impact on your life. Like if you're rich and you get fired, you know, oh well. um but if you're poor and you get fired, well, your kids might not eat tomorrow. So they take this as, okay, well, someone who's poor can be kind of coerced into a lot of things by people who have sort of power. But this is this inequality, this economic inequality, isn't the only inequality in society, and isn't the only inequality that creates sort of asymmetries of power. This is just sort of a natural thing that happens in all realms. Okay, there's all sorts of social inequality that just naturally occurs. Because some people are just sort of in more highly regarded social positions. Okay, if you're a politician who's really well known and has a lot of influence, so you're just going to naturally have power. It's not because you're rich. It might allow you to become richer, but you just might be someone who people like, and now you are going to have power over the people. There are going to be people whose decisions you make might play a role in, have big consequences to them. Okay, but it's not necessarily economic. I mean, think of like a preacher in a church or the pope. Okay, they have a major amount of influence, and it's not purely economic. There's a social level, and there's also a cultural level, in the sense that creative people, and it's oftentimes like creative people who on the left, but oftentimes creativity and art. And I love art, music, and all these creative endeavors. But at the end of the day, they're huge expressions of inequality and power asymmetries by their nature. Okay, in the sense that you're going out of the way to say how you're different and trying to create influence. You trying to create a unique. You may not think you're trying to create influence, but the idea is that when people appreciate something that you create that is unique to you, you're creating your own sort of unique bubble of power. Okay, and that power can have an effect on other people, good or bad. Okay, if you're a super famous musician, yeah, you may also be rich, but even if you weren't rich, like even if you stripped all the money away from the most famous musician, they'd still have a tremendous amount of power by the sheer fact of their notoriety and their cultural standing. And they can have power over sort of, sometimes life or death power over others. So these power asymmetries are sort of naturally occurring. There are going to be people who just are going to be more influential. That are going to be more liked. That are going to be more creative. That are going to be more successful. And those people are naturally going to end up accumulate power because of it. It's not purely economic. You can redistribute all the income, and there's still, you take a look at, any attempt at, a pure, equal sort of egalitarian society. Even if you were to dissipate economic inequality, you create inequality elsewhere, and oftentimes it's in politics, where basically the people who are politically in now have greater power. Okay, so you just give these politicians more power, who oftentimes it becomes less about any kind of merit or ability or even likability. It just becomes that you just know the people in power, the people who were in power, and you've inherited sort of that power. It becomes very. It may not be like a monarchy where it's passed down to your children, but it's still passed down to your friends and people who are your cronies. Okay, power is not something that you sort of power asymmetries are not something you just eliminate because you create some rules and say, yes, let's all be better to each other. We are humans with preferences. There are going to be people we listen to more. Okay, I may listen to my parents more than I listen to Bob or Steve. Okay, I may listen to my boss more than I listen to some stranger. Okay, no one's going to weigh all people equally and how they influence their actions. They're not going to weigh there's people can always do things that will change that weighing. So focusing so much on power asymmetry just seems like, one, hypocritical, because everything we do creates power asymmetries. Like, again, our roles in society, our cultural works, our economic success, it all comes down to us trying to distinguish ourselves. And by distinguishing yourself, you are creating an inequality, and you are essentially creating a block of power for yourself. But I don't begrudge you for doing so. I would love to be I do music. I'm not famous, but I would love to be famous because I would love the idea that people appreciate the music that I want. But I do realize, I don't deny the fact that if people appreciated my music more, that I may suddenly now have some influence over them, whether I use it, whether I do or don't abuse it. Same thing with anything else that I do. If this podcast, where they suddenly have a huge listener base, that I would have some sort of power asymmetry with other individuals who don't necessarily have that platform. So it's, again, it just seems to me like you're looking at the wrong problem. Okay, at the end of the day, like, as a libertarian, I'm focused more on agency. Like, okay, that no one's going to have an equal amount of power. You're never going to, you can rearrange all the money, you can rearrange all the property, you can have all people dress the same and just destroy the fashion industry, make all people listen to the same music, and get rid of the music industry and get rid of all creative outlets that allow anyone to distinguish themselves from anybody else. But at the end of the day, there's going to be people who have to enforce that, and those people are going to have a power asymmetry to everybody else. Okay? So by the nature of the fact that any kind of egalitarian society requires enforcement, you have power asymmetry between the enforcement mechanism, and that power asymmetry will get abused. Power asymmetries will be abused. There's no changing that, and power asymmetries will exist, and there's no changing that. What you can do is give people the opportunity, the agency, to escape when they can. Whether it's by creating alternatives, by being able to associate with different people, by being able to have more choices in the culture that they enjoy. Just giving them the opportunity to escape the abusive relationships they may enter. There's no promise that they will. But there's no promise of anything. But at least when you're free and people are free to create options for others, whether it's, again, options of goods and services and relationships and whatnot for others, there's at least the hope that they might decide to break those chains of abuse that exist here and there. But interfering and trying to force people to reject the chains that bind them, just generally, I don't feel like it quite does the trick. Because there does have to be sort of a leap of faith, a willingness to take responsibility of the uncertain, to take those chains and tear them off. Okay, be willing to be okay that things are going to be uncertain, but at least they're yours to decide. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to adopt. And at the same time, and I'm talking about like informal chains, like, again, the chains you choose that can be abusive, in the sense, like, being in an abusive relationship, staying at a job that doesn't treat you well or appreciate you, being part of organizations that take advantage of you. Like, these are chains that you choose, and you need to choose to let them go. Interfering them with the rules to sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to prevent this and prevent that and prevent this, it basically disincentivizes people not to have those conversations with themselves, to not think that they need to have this comfort with uncertainty. Okay, of course, any kind of compulsion of others, that's just off the table. Okay, if someone actually does literally put you in chains, those chains should be removed because that wasn't your choice. In a sense, like, you are being forced, violence is being used upon you. Again, there's a difference. But my point is, like, these inequalities, these power relationships, these abuses occur not purely out of economic means, not because of private property. They can happen in a society with no private property. It's happened before. You have societies that are, again, egalitarian, communist, whatever, and you still have a power or a ruling class. Because, again, then it just becomes the enforcement mechanism, and that's the worst. Okay, when the people who are expected to have to enact violence on others naturally have just sort of the natural sort of the only power asymmetry allowed, that just seems extra dangerous and extra vile. So, yeah, that was just some thoughts. Hopefully you take that for what it's worth, and you found it interesting. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great day and enjoy. Make sure to check out alexmerced.com. Join the Discord or Slack channels if you want to, check in with me and give me ideas for episodes or things you want to hear. That's generally where you'll be able to find me and communicate with me pretty much anytime you want. Talk to you later.